One of the most rewarding aspects of being a Star Wars vs. series creator is the ability to give highly underrated and often underestimated characters some much needed publicity. Contrary to what some people on the internet would have you believe, one does not need to be the most heavily featured to be the more viable in a contest of skill. What one does need is for the skills and tactics they use to address the nature of the contest in question. As such, it is always a treat to analyze an obscure character's skill set and discover that he or she possesses the capabilities to bring down one of the preemptive masters of a given era. However, try as we might to draft a comprehensive analysis of their skills, some characters are just too unusual or obscure to ever be used in the Versus series. With that in mind, I bring you the top 10 characters that cannot be used in the Star Wars Versus series. Number 10. Jocasta Nu. Kicking off our list is the warm, if somewhat overconfident, Chief Librarian of the Jedi Order. While featured in various media from books to the Attack of the Clones film itself, the primary reason Jocasta can't be used in the Versus series is that her capabilities, at least in a combative sense, are completely unknown. She's never been depicted in a serious lightsaber duel with another trained Force wielder. You're going to be hearing me say that a lot in this video. And all mention of her skills comes from word of mouth. The closest thing to an actual fight we ever got out of Jocasta was when the bounty hunter Casto Parati took her form and engaged Ahsoka Tano. But even then, Ahsoka remarked that Casto possessed Jocasta's shape, but absolutely none of her skill. While her position as a former member of the Jedi Council means that she undoubtedly possessed more skill than most, the nature of her fighting style, as well as the tactics she employed in single combat, remain an enigma. Additionally, Nu's focus on academics and diplomacy over combat and use of the lightsaber means that she likely wouldn't have been all that noteworthy of a fighter in any case. A conclusion that I feel is heavily reinforced by how Darth Vader so easily dispatched her during Operation Nightfall, as even a Tier 3 combatant would have lasted longer than she did. Number 9. Ood Bnar. Another Jedi historian, this time hailing from ancient times, Ood Bnar unfortunately suffers many of the same practical limitations as his Tales of the Jedi contemporaries. While the TOTJ Reader's Companion sheds a great deal of light on Ood's physical attributes and capabilities as a Force wielder, there is absolutely no information on his skills as a martial artist. Bnar's training of Shalia Nur, one of the Jedi Order's greatest turret attack hunters, may reflect well on his capabilities as a lightsaber instructor, but how one conducts themselves in a regulated sparring arena versus single combat is going to be drastically different. In fact, Ood Bnar is on record as saying that physical combat was not his specialty, preferring the life of a teacher and a scholar to that of a warrior. While he did engage Exar Kun in a lightsaber duel during the Great Sith War, one could hardly call it a fight, as the engagement itself lasted all of 3 panels, during which they ignite their blades, clash once, Then Ood is immediately blindsided by a Massassi warrior and brought to his knees. Even factoring in the time between panel transitions, that fight couldn't have lasted more than a few minutes. And gleaming any solid information from it is rendered impossible by the majority of the duel taking place off-panel. Number 8. Odan-Urr. This is going to sound much like my previous entry, mainly because the reasoning behind Odan-Urr's placement on this list is much the same as Ood Bnar's. While we know a great deal about the nature and magnitude of Odan's force abilities, in fact I dare say he was the Yoda of his era, we know nothing about his capabilities as a swordsman. Like Ood Bnar, Odan-Urr was an educator, a philosopher, a mind focused on the betterment of spirit and the preservation of knowledge. He thusly has a natural disdain for violence. He does not shy away from combat when it is necessary, but he doesn't devote his energies towards improving his skills either, preferring to best his opponents through his force abilities or defusing a volatile situation outright with his legendary diplomatic skills. While he did use his lightsaber to great effect against a gang of criminals on Sinagar, Odan-Urr has never been depicted in a serious lightsaber duel with another trained force wielder, which means that his typical response in a lightsaber duel is something of a mystery. And there just isn't enough information to draw on to hypothesize, as the Drathos renounced the lightsaber in its entirety shortly after the conclusion of the Great Hyperspace War. Number 7. Haad Ventor. This one makes me sad. I mean, you guys know how much I love this Jedi. Despite having a great backstory that delves deep into the themes of trust and redemption, we have little to no information regarding Haad's capabilities as a combatant. In regards to martial arts training, while we know that the Almas Academy did indeed train their students in the 7 traditional forms, no information exists regarding the styles of combat Ventor himself employed. And unlike certain characters like Warb Null or Kaosen Darach, we can't analyze his feats and make an educated guess because he's never been depicted taking part in a single fight, which leaves us with nothing to work with. In regards to combative tactics, Haad may have been awarded the Republic Medallion of Honor for his service in the Clone Wars, but we have no idea why. Was it for his skills in single combat? His prowess on the battlefield? Was he a gifted tactician who developed ingenious strategies, the likes of which the CIS had never seen? I don't know, and neither does anyone else. Ventor's capabilities as a force wielder are left similarly vague. While he likely possessed the basic skill set common to all Jedi, his level of skill at employing them remains unknown. We don't know his upper limit regarding his ability to conjure force illusions, and obviously transcending the physical plane as a force spirit isn't much use in combat. It's okay, Haad. I still appreciate you. Number 6. Darth Tenebrous. This one is also very disappointing, as I thoroughly enjoy Darth Tenebrous as a character. While Tenebrous's displays during a cave collapse on Baldebnik give us a pretty solid idea of how this guy operates as a combative force wielder, Once again, it is the lack of information regarding martial arts training that breaks it for this guy. Tenebrous may have been noted as an avid combat enthusiast who frequently enjoyed a good sparring match, but that's hardly enough to construct a solid breakdown of his skills. Preferred martial arts discipline? Don't know. Method for which he employed his style? Don't know. Level of skill? Don't know. Is there a correlation to be made between him and his apprentices? Don't know. Conduct on the battlefield? Don't know. Conduct in single combat? Everyone say it with me now. Don't know. Tenebrous also shares in the ever-crippling trope of never having been depicted in a serious lightsaber duel with another trained Force wielder, which, as mentioned, leaves us with nothing to analyze and nothing to work with. At least Darth Plagueis, despite being a relatively crappy duelist, has at least a few fights to his name. Tenebrous has, well, nothing. Nothing at all. While ludicrously intelligent, all of his displays of ingenuity have been limited strictly to grand-scale plans and manipulations. So gauging Darth Tenebrous's capabilities as a combative tactician and strategist lies somewhere between extremely difficult and outright impossible. Number 5. Tulak Hord. Whereas some of the previous entries on this list somewhat fall into the archetype of word of mouth and nothing else, this guy embodies it. Tulak Hord is dead. We have never had a story centered around him when he was alive, and for the longest time, we didn't even know what this guy looked like. All the facts about him stem solely from his reputation. And while yes, a solid reputation can help in constructing a set of statistics around a character, you need at least some solid facts and a few fights to back it up. He was hailed as a legendary lightsaber duelist. Okay, fair enough. But we have no idea what fighting styles or combative tactics he employed. He's never been depicted in a single duel, nor can a correlation be made with a clone or an apprentice. It's reputation without the substance, which is a very bad thing when the substance is what is needed to construct a solid breakdown of his capabilities. Is he as skilled as other renowned lightsaber duelists like Qui-Gon Jinn or Kit Fisto? We honestly can't say for sure one way or the other because there's nothing to work with. Beyond dabbling in Sith sorcery to an unspecified degree, Hord's capabilities as a combative Force wielder are left pretty vague. The only time he has ever been mentioned employing telekinesis was when Kiam Vel revealed that he once pulled down an Endar Spire ship from the sky. While fairly impressive, this accomplishment is significantly watered down by the fact that it is unknown as to whether or not Tulak Hord did this on a whim, or if he had to spend a great deal of time gathering his energies, as even Jedi younglings can lift several tons when given enough time to concentrate. Number 4. Freedon Nadd. Nadd is a very abnormal character in that we know the breadth of his capabilities at all the wrong times in his life. Freedon Nadd's prime, and the time frame from which a versus match could be made, was during his reign as the king of Onderon thousands of years before the Battle of Yavin. Unfortunately, we know absolutely nothing about his capabilities during that time frame. Naysayers will cite Nadd's duel with the Jedi Master Mata Trimaean, but they forget that engagement took place years before Freedon reached the apex of his power. He wasn't some fearsome Sith Lord during that duel. He was just some dumb, angsty teenager too upset to see the blatantly obvious truth of why the Jedi Masters withheld knighthood from him. While I concede that this fight does give us a pretty good idea about how this guy operated in a lightsaber duel, we can't apply that showing to his Sith Lord incarnation because judging his rate of improvement would require a ridiculous amount of assumptions. He could have gotten better. He could have gotten worse. We just can't say. Moving on to power in the Force, we actually have a full RPG character sheet on Freedon Nadd's Force powers as a dark side spirit, but not as a living being. We can't use Ghost Freedon in a versus match, mainly because the limitations of how he can affect and in turn be affected by the physical realm is really ill-defined. We know he could kill, but we don't know if or how one can defend themselves against him. We know he can be banished, but we don't know what abilities are required to do so. We know he could use telekinesis, but we don't know to what degree. We know he could be destroyed, but we don't know if this can be done by an individual in their natural state or if they require the aid of a powerful dark side artifact like Exar Kun's gauntlets. So, in conclusion, the only snippets of saber skill we have for Freedon Nadd is when he was a young Jedi. We know nothing about his tactical sensibilities, and his only showings of Force power were when he was reduced to a dark side spirit with very unclear limitations on what he can and cannot do. Yeah, this is why I opted for a Nadd the story of video instead of a versus match. Number 3. Marka Ragnos. Really, this guy can't be used for many of the same reasons as Freedon Nadd. He's a freaking ghost, not a living flesh and blood sentient who can just pick up a lightsaber and start swinging. That being said, the reason I place Ragnos higher on this list than Nadd is at least Nadd actually had a single lightsaber duel and full RPG stats, albeit in a spirit form, to draw on. There has never been a story featuring Marka Ragnos when he was alive, and all mention of his capabilities come from word of mouth rather than solid showings of skill. As far as martial arts training is concerned, while we do know that he earned the title of Dark Lord of the Sith by besting the Sith Lord Simus in single combat, there is no information available about how that duel actually played out, nor the combative tactics he typically employed. The closest thing to a real lightsaber duel he has ever been shown taking part in was when he possessed the body of Tavion Aximus and dueled the Jedi Knight Jaden Kor during the Battle of Korriban in 14 ABY. Considering that even after being supercharged by the energy of powerful Force Nexes like Yavin 4 and Dagobah, and having the power and skills of Tavion Aximus added to his own, Marka Ragnos still got his ass kicked by a 15-year-old Jedi Knight? He probably wasn't as great a swordsman as some might think. Ragnos may have been noted as one of the most powerful Sith Lords in galactic history, with a strong affinity for Sith sorcery and magic, But again, we know nothing about the powers he employed beyond transcending the physical plane as a Force spirit following his physical death. Number 2. The Hero of Tython. It's one thing not to have much information on a character's capabilities as a lightsaber duelist and Force wielder, but it's another to have both of those tropes and not even have a name. The physical attributes, fighting styles, tactics, and Force abilities of the Hero of Tython are determined entirely by the actions of the player, which makes constructing a solid breakdown of his or her skills impossible. Whereas other video game-centric characters like Jaden Korr, Revan, and to a lesser extent Mitra Surik have established backstories and other works outside their games to solidify their capabilities, this guy or girl has nothing but the game to draw on. And even in the game, we are given little to no information regarding our character's occupation and history prior to the main story. Additionally, while the game does employ story-driven cutscenes, we can't use these as an ironclad method of compiling a breakdown, as the nature of SWTOR's choice system means that there are literally dozens of ways the Hero of Tython could potentially develop as a combatant, and thousands of ways he could develop tactically. Perhaps things will change in future expansions and spin-offs of the SWTOR timeframe, but as it stands, this guy or girl is nothing more than a blank slate for the player to fill in. No confirmed fighting styles, no confirmed tactical prowess, no confirmed Force abilities, and no confirmed name. Before we get to number 1, I'd like to take a moment to address several characters that could be used in a Versus Series match, even though many fans believe that they could not. Obelisk Armor Darth Bane. Contrary to popular belief, Bane in this state is not invincible. In fact, I believe an argument could be made for Obelisk Bane being even easier to take down than DOE Bane. We clearly see during the Battle of Tython that he can be defeated, it's just not very easy to do. Whereas a direct offensive is guaranteed to fail due to the Obelisk's lightsaber-resistant shells, skill-based attacks aimed towards the small areas where the armor doesn't cover, like his head, wrists, and heels, have been proven effective against him. Darth Bane was also much less tactically inclined when operating in this state, making him more susceptible to tactical blunders. The Obelisk armor itself was also extremely sensitive towards electrical discharges, and could be destroyed with an intense barrage of Force lightning. Darth Sion. Unlike many characters featured on this list, Darth Sion has no shortage of material to draw on. We have more than enough showings to construct a solid martial arts breakdown. We know the measure of his tactical sensibilities, and we have a pretty good idea about what he is capable of as a combative Force wielder. The big sticking point for many is that, well, this guy can't die. Even if you are more skilled or more powerful than him, it's not going to matter how many times you beat him down, because he'll just get up again. Really, the only way to kill Sion is for his opponent to basically convince him that a life of pain isn't very awesome, and he would be better off just letting himself die. Seriously, that whole sequence in KOTOR 2 basically went like this. So, what's keeping you alive? Pain. Doesn't that kinda suck? Yeah. Did you ever consider just letting yourself die and be at peace? You know, I never actually thought of that. Blech. That being said, even though Scion can only die when he wants to, that doesn't mean he's unusable in a match. All that would really need to be done would be to have his opponent be more skilled or powerful than he is, but instead of killing him, have it so they subdue Scion and take him to a prison. That way, you could still have a proper match, and you work around Darth Scion's immortality. Darth Nihilus. I'm sure many of you were expecting him to be on this list, and while yes, Nihilus is a very broken combatant, he's not necessarily an unusable one. He may have only been involved in a few fights with another trained force wielder, but there's still enough info for us to analyze and construct a martial arts breakdown, and we know a great deal about his capabilities as a tactician and force wielder. However, the oddity with Nihilus stems more from the fact that the range of opponents he can face is very unbalanced. Victory or defeat against Darth Nihilus comes down to one factor. Can his opponent resist advanced applications of force drain? If they can't, they're dead. But if they can, they are almost guaranteed victory. Something I don't think a lot of fans fully grasp is that Darth Nihilus is basically racing against the clock whenever he fights. He has to drain the life from other living beings, otherwise he quite literally collapses under the weight of his own power in a matter of minutes. The more power he wastes on trying to drain an undrainable victim, the more weak and exhausted he himself becomes. I liken the criteria to resist force drain to the same ones required to resist the force stun ability, in that the ability to resist depends on the target's personal strength in the force, as well as their mental and spiritual fortitude. To put this in perspective, while Darth Nihilus would likely lose to powerful and disciplined Jedi Masters like Yoda, Mace Windu, and Obi-Wan Kenobi, or other Force anomalies like Anakin Skywalker and Mitra Surik, both of whom having been credited with resistance to Force drain, he would crush lesser Jedi like Kit Fisto, Ki-Adi-Mundi, or Deepa Billaba with contemptuous ease. Number 1. The Ones. Special thanks to Ready4 for helping me with the placement of this one. Taking the top spot on our list is the family of exceptionally powerful force wielders who inhabit the planet Mortis. Where do I begin with these guys? While I have absolutely no problem with the Ones in concept, they are without question some of the most unbalanced characters in the Star Wars franchise. In regards to physical abilities, each of the Ones are impossible to gauge accurately due to their ability to shapeshift. One minute they can appear as young or aged humanoids, the next they will appear as a griffin, or a gargoyle, or a terrifying tentacle monster with a creepy as all hell smile that stretches unnaturally wide across their face. Not only have any of them ever been depicted in a serious lightsaber duel with another trained force wielder, but they have never been depicted employing physical combat techniques of any variety beyond a few basic throws and stabs. As the title Force Wielder would imply, these godlike entities were combative Force wielders first and foremost, employing advanced applications of tutaminis and telekinetic disarmaments as a means of dealing with lightsaber-wielding adversaries. While this style of combat of course gave them their own unique flavor, it meant that they were somewhat held back as fighters. However, while reformations can and have been made for pure Force wielders in the past, the biggest reason for why none of these guys could be used in a Versus Series match proper comes down to their Force abilities. The Ones are ludicrously powerful. They are the living embodiments of the various sides of the Force itself, and without question, some of the most powerful Force wielders in galactic history. This means they will win roughly 99.9% of all matches they could be used in just on the back of their Force abilities alone, which is boring and utterly pointless to anybody who is watching. Both the father and the son have humbled the likes of Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi, two of the most powerful Force wielders in the history of the Jedi Order, and Abeloth, the mother of the Ones, and arguably the most powerful of the family, had a greater strength in the Force than Luke Skywalker, the most powerful Jedi Master of all time. Another knock against the Ones being used in a match is the fact that the ramifications of how they could be harmed is spotty at best. The daughter claims that only the Dagger of Mortis can harm her brother, but we see in the very next episode, the son is effectively killed by Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber. Consistency is all I ask for, people. While we know that the Ones can be harmed by the Force attacks of those not of their kin, the amount of power it actually takes to cause them any real damage is maddening. Do remember that it took the combined might of the most powerful Jedi in galactic history and arguably the second most powerful Sith Lord in galactic history to finally bring Abeloth down. And I can only think of a small handful of other Force wielders that could potentially do the Ones any real harm. Whether through their unpredictable shapeshifting, lack of martial prowess, or ridiculously OP Force abilities, the Ones of Mortis are truly unusable in the Star Wars Versus series. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed this little countdown of the top 10 characters that could not be used in the Versus series. Please feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys later.